This story is simply called Suzuki.
This happened when I was still a high school student. My friend Yamada and his parents had to attend a Buddhist memorial service, and they were away for 3 days. It was a summer holiday, but Tanaka and I, so far, had nothing interesting to do, so we decided to stay over at Yamada's place since he was alone while his parents were away. We got together in the evening and first cooked dinner together. After that, we started telling each other some ghost stories. It was then that Yamada's old friend from junior high school called Suzuki came over to join us. Suzuki was quiet and very serious. At first glance, he looked like possibly a pampered rich kid who was kind of small for his age. He didn't look like a high school student at all. Tanaka and I met Suzuki for the first time, but Suzuki kept up with our conversation easily, like we had known each other for a long time, even though he never made a comment about anything we said. After Yamada told us each some urban legends, I started telling them my favorite creepy story. But Tanaka started to make fun of me. Even as I spoke, he kept interrupting me with stupid remarks and tried his best to dampen my mood. "You're just scared, admit it. That's why you're being such a nuisance." "No, I'm not. Don't blame me if your story is boring," Tanaka said. At the time, we often became competitive about small things, which sometimes led to a full-on fight. Yamada wasn't about to stand by and watch us get into a scuffle, so he came up with sort of an idea to pacify us. "Why don't you decide who is more brave by trying a game of dare?" Tanaka thought that was a cool idea, but I wasn't so into it. There's a storehouse around the Shinsai Bridge. I heard some ghost reports and some paranormal sightings around there. My own friend from junior high school told me he and his girlfriend saw it with their own eyes. So let's have the contest there. Suzuki told us he would go and left to go home because it was getting late for him. By the time the three of us left for the storehouse, it was 11 p.m. and Suzuki excused himself. No one seemed to even notice he left. There was a small empty lot near the bridge and an old prefab storehouse stood on it. The prefab had sliding doors that were padlocked. "This padlock is actually broken," said Yamada flatly, as he took the padlock off without any hindrance. "My friend brought his girlfriend to this place and they were doing it inside. That was when they saw it. I hear that some homeless guy died in here. I bet it was his ghost that appeared to them." The inside was about as large as a classroom. Some sandbags, some safety cones, and some poles were stored in here in an organized manner. Because of the riverbank protection, they needed to have these works here just in case it overflowed. Going on for the last several years, there had been safety cones that hadn't been in use, and most of the other things in here weren't in use either because that overflow hadn't happened for a long time. All that was left was one light bulb hanging overhead, but we couldn't find a switch to turn it on. Doing it alone would definitely be too hard, so I was glad someone else was there. "I'll let you two stay together," said Tanaka. "You get an extra 30 minutes alone to yourself after, though, and the one who gives up is the one who loses." "Okay," said Tanaka right away. He was smirking and looked at me. Is he trying to say that the game has already started, I thought? Is he trying to intimidate me? "I will lock the door outside and I'll come and reopen it after an hour," said Yamada. "Hey, leave the flashlight, will you?" When I asked Yamada, the smoker Tanaka turned on his 100 yen lighter. "This'll be enough," he said. It looked like if we could climb up the sandbags, and we could turn the bulb on. There was also a fixed sash window. Faint light from the bridge lamps was seeping through the window, so straight away, I secured a place for myself next to the window. He who gave up first would be the loser. I decided to just shut my mouth tight and bear it like a real man. Tanaka lit a cigarette, and when our eyes had grown accustomed to the dark, he finally opened his mouth. "So, Yamada said that his friend once brought his girlfriend over here. I wonder what they were doing." "You're such an idiot," I said. Tanaka was probably afraid of the silence and the dark just as much as I was. But if we stayed all chummy with each other, it wouldn't be much of a game, so I stubbornly ignored him. Maybe they spread out some blue sheets on the floor and did something here? Tanaka got up and lit the surrounding area with his lighter. The room had 2 blocks of sandbags, one large and the other small, and between them was a small aisle. The smaller block was piled up by the window and we sat atop it. For some reason, there was a rope coiled up like a snake lying next to it. "What do they have at the back there?" he said. Tanaka cautiously started walking between the sandbags. I couldn't believe his nerves. I was so scared to be left alone for 1 second. How could he just walk around here when he knew a homeless man had died in here? I prepared myself to run to Tanaka's side if anything happened, and endured the loneliness for the time being. "Hey, I found some incense," Tanaka uttered nonchalantly. His figure, which had been vaguely discernible before, had suddenly melted into the dark. "Ah, it's just a mosquito coil. Perhaps some other people came in here recently?" It seems he was more worried about what Yamada's friends had been doing in here before than his own fear. It was astonishing that he could imagine something like that in such a situation. "Whoa, look what we have here. I found Yamada's friend's bag. Wow, I can't believe he left it here. It must have been when he was here with that cute girl. I heard she's quite a catch at school. Have you seen what she looks like?" I thought for a second and wondered why Tanaka was still talking. He was too far away from me to be able to have a conversation. "Hey Tanaka, who are you talking to?" That's when I heard it. "Oh my god!" There was silence for a second, and then Tanaka started screaming his head off. He shot out behind the sandbags, ignoring me. He threw his body against the door. The doors, which were probably poorly constructed, blew off their hinges. The light from the lamps outside flooded back in, and I glanced towards the back of the storehouse. Huh? Is that Suzuki back there? Having no time to hesitate, I followed Tanaka out of the storehouse. Wait, I think we just saw Suzuki in there right now. I finally caught up with him in front of a convenience store and took a deep breath. We've been duped. Both Yamada and Suzuki ganged up to scare us. Suzuki? Who's Suzuki? Tanaka gave me a blank look. Huh? Our conversations were not matching up. Well, who are you talking to back there? It was too dark to see, but I thought I was talking to you. I couldn't see the face, but there was definitely someone there behind me. That must have been Suzuki, I said. While I spoke, I was thinking, that guy certainly didn't look like the sort of guy who would go around poking in dark places like that or pulling pranks on people. I remember that back at Yamada's house, Suzuki sat in front of me and listened and never really said anything. He never really spoke, but sometimes nodded to my story as if he were really interested. And I was even beginning to like him a little. However, Tanaka was adamant that no one by the name of Suzuki had ever visited that night. We decided we would both go back to Yamada and settle the matter. We walked to his house to get him to tell us whether or not Suzuki was there. As soon as we rang the doorbell, Yamada came out looking uneasy. Where the hell have you two been? Asked Yamada. Tanaka and I looked at each other in confusion. What do you remember happening last night? I asked Yamada. Okay, here's what I remember, said Yamada. After we had a meal, we sat on the sofa and watched baseball on TV together, right? We all agreed on that part. I was up until late last night, so I nodded off as we watched the baseball game, said Yamada. You look sleepy, so I started telling you a ghost story. Tanaka nodded in agreement. While we were talking, a guy named Suzuki, who was your classmate, came into the room, right? I said. Only I remembered this part. Dude, I have no friend named Suzuki. You're saying he just came into my house without asking? When I couldn't answer this question, Tanaka finally spoke up. Look, you remember telling us to do the dare in the storehouse, right? By the riverside, don't you? The one with all the sandbags and the cones? You don't remember that? Yamada ignored me and started walking off. He was headed towards the storehouse. We followed him, and on the walk there, nobody spoke. When we got there, everyone stayed completely silent until Yamada finally opened his mouth. I know about this storehouse. I walk past it every day. I walk past it every day since junior high school. Yamada started to turn pale. A long time ago, a guy who was being bullied hanged himself inside that place. We were aghast. Last night I was sleeping, and I dreamed. Yamada opened his mouth suddenly, as if trying to break the heavy silence but being unable to speak. I dreamed I saw you guys in a room, and you were both dead because you had hanged yourselves. Just as all of us raised our faces, the lights inside the storehouse suddenly turned on of their own accord. A white human shape in mist form glided past the windows. Alright guys, that's a little bit of a confusing story tonight, and it's mostly due to the way it was written and translated. I do want you guys all to know when I read these stories to you, I'm first translating them into English from Japanese, after which I have to rewrite it again into English that makes sense, and then I have to rewrite it again into English that sounds more eloquent. I don't always have the time to get it fixed into a way in which it sounds beautiful when spoken, but I get it into a way in which I hope I can get the story across. Today's story is a little bit confusing due to the fact that we have three characters. We have Tanaka, we have Yamada, we have Suzuki, and if we count the main character telling the story, we have a fourth. Okay? Let me try and go through with you how exactly this story plays out. Yamada is at his house alone because his parents are gone on a Buddhist shrine visit, and they are at his place chilling out, just having a good time like a sleepover, when they start to watch a baseball game, and as they get sleepy, Yamada starts to tell them a ghost story. Now, in Tanaka, in the writer's mind, they're asked by Yamada if they can take a dare. And this is after his friend Suzuki walks into the room and joins them for a couple of stories. They do this dare because Tanaka and the author are kind of having a battle as to who tells the scariest ghost story, who's the manliest, etc., etc. After this sort of scuffle or fight or miffed sort of battle they have verbally through words, Suzuki, I think, becomes a bit uncomfortable and leaves the room and goes home. They kind of just ignore it, and no one else says anything, so the author of the story doesn't say anything either when Suzuki leaves. They listen to Yamada's contest to find out who's the strongest man, who's the bravest man, and they go to this storehouse that he suggests they go to by the river and spend the night there because apparently a homeless guy died there. While they're in there, Tanaka starts to talk to somebody who the author can't see. Tanaka is thinking that he's talking to the author, but he's actually talking to a shadowy figure deep back in the storeroom where they can't see very well. Meanwhile, the writer of the story gets scared because Tanaka runs out when he realizes he's not talking to someone, looks back on his way out and sees Suzuki, who had visited earlier to the house. When they get out there, he asks him, "Were you talking to Suzuki in there?" In which Tanaka replies, "Who the heck is Suzuki?" Now they're both confused. The author remembers Suzuki coming and listening to their ghost stories. Tanaka does not remember. They decide to fix their argument as to whether or not Suzuki was there. They'll go back to Yamada's house and ask him if Suzuki had ever joined them for these ghost stories. When they get back there, Yamada has a totally different story from Tanaka and the author. They all went to bed last night, and when he woke up, they were gone. He never asked them to go to the storehouse. He never dared them to do this sort of who's the manliest battle. And he also never saw Suzuki. He's so frightened by this and so perturbed, he says, "Let's just go to the storehouse all together." When they get back there, he tells them the story of a student from his junior high school days that committed suicide due to bullying inside that storehouse with the rope that is mentioned earlier in the story. That student was Suzuki. As the story ends, you see Suzuki's ghost rush by the window. I hope you enjoyed that story today. I'm Unrested. This was Creepypasta.